Simone Aldridge was 33 years old when she drove back to an empty wedding venue at midnight, just to grab a pair of earrings before her own wedding morning. She used her keycard. She walked toward the bridal suite alone. She heard her mother's voice first, then her fiancé's. Patrice had spent 8 years terrified of becoming invisible after Simone's father left her for someone younger. Julian had spent 8 months smiling at Simone, while his business quietly drowned in debt, needing her family's money more than he ever needed her. Neither of them heard the door open. Neither of them saw her standing there. Simone didn't scream. She didn't cry. She lifted her phone, took one photograph through the gap in the door, and closed it without a sound. Tomorrow, 300 guests would watch her walk down that same aisle, believing they knew exactly how this wedding would end. They had no idea what she was about to do instead. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The candles had burned low, that warm, golden light that made everything look like a photograph. It was fading now, the wicks drowning slowly in little pools of wax. The private dining room at Carver Hall smelled like gardenias and roasted lamb and expensive wine, and the last few guests were pulling on their coats, laughing softly, not quite ready to let the evening go. Simone Aldridge stood near the doorway and smiled like she meant it, because she did. "I keep telling people," Yolanda said beside her, nudging her shoulder, "that you did not have to send everyone home with a gift bag. You are not the one getting paid tomorrow." Simone laughed. "It came easy. Grandma Vivian picked them out. I just approved the ribbon color." "Of course she did." Yolanda shook her head, grinning. "That woman runs this family like a Fortune 500 company." She wasn't wrong. Vivian Aldridge, 78 years old and still sharp enough to cut glass, had organized half this rehearsal dinner from her armchair at home. The floral arrangements, the seating chart, the small linen pouches stamped with the wedding date that every guest was now carrying out the door. Vivian hadn't even attended tonight, said she needed her rest for tomorrow, but her fingerprints were on everything. Simone accepted a hug from her Aunt Renee, then another from a college friend she hadn't seen in 2 years. She kept moving through the room the way she moved through any job site, purposeful, warm, in command. That was just who she was. At work, she was the woman her firm called when a project was behind schedule or a client was losing their nerve. She drew up plans, managed contractors, solved problems before they became emergencies. She had built that reputation carefully, over a decade, and it had settled into her like a second skeleton. Control wasn't something Simone needed to think about. It was just how she stood. From across the room, she could see Julian holding court near the bar. 3 of his fraternity brothers hung on his every word, laughing at whatever he'd just said. Julian Reeves had a gift for that, for making a room feel like it was lucky to have him in it. He was tall, clean-cut, the kind of handsome that photographed well. Tomorrow, he would stand at the altar in a charcoal suit, and he would look exactly like what every wedding guest hoped to see. Simone watched him for a moment. He was smiling, but his eyes kept dropping to his phone. She noticed that, filed it away without making anything of it. Julian had a deal in the works, some property in the warehouse district that had been giving him headaches for months. It was probably that. Then she noticed her mother. Patrice Aldridge moved through the room in a deep burgundy dress, her hair pinned up at the back of her neck, her smile wide and warm, and just a little too bright for this hour of the night. She crossed to Julian's side with a fresh glass of bourbon, and Simone watched her set a hand on his forearm, light, brief, and say something close to his ear before straightening his tie with 2 careful fingers. Julian laughed. His eyes finally left his phone. Simone felt something small and indistinct move through her chest. Not alarm, not even suspicion, just a quiet, nameless flicker, the kind you feel when a room's temperature shifts by 1 degree and you can't explain how you know. She looked away. Her mother had been like this all evening, close to Julian, attentive, full of little touches and fussings that she would have called maternal if anyone asked. Just making sure he feels welcomed, just being warm. Patrice Aldridge had always needed a reason to be in the center of things, especially since the divorce. 8 years of rebuilding herself, her confidence, her relevance, her sense of being seen. And she had poured a good deal of that rebuilding into Simone's wedding. Every vendor decision had come with an opinion. Every seating arrangement had required a conversation. Simone had let most of it go because it seemed to make her mother happy, and because she understood, somewhere underneath the patience, how afraid her mother was of becoming someone no one noticed anymore. She just hadn't expected the hovering to extend quite so far in Julian's direction. A hand landed on her shoulder, firm, familiar. "You good?" Damon. Her brother stood beside her with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, holding a glass of water he probably hadn't touched. He was watching the same direction she had been. "I'm fine," she said. His eyes didn't move. "You sure?" "Damon." She said it the way she always said his name when he was doing the big brother thing. Flat, fond, final. He let it go, but his jaw stayed tight. By 9:30, the room had mostly emptied. The catering staff moved quietly between the tables, collecting glasses, folding linens. The gardenias were starting to smell too sweet in the warm air. Simone reached for her clutch and stopped. The earrings. Vivian's earrings. Small gold drops set with dark amber stones that had belonged to Simone's great-grandmother, were sitting in a velvet pouch inside the bridal suite at the end of the East Hall. She had set them there that afternoon, meaning to carry them home tonight, and then she had gotten swept up in greeting guests and she had simply forgotten. She pulled the venue key from her clutch and turned to Yolanda. "I left Grandma's earrings in the bridal suite," she said. "I'm going to swing back and grab them before I head home." Yolanda frowned. "You want me to come?" "It's literally down the hall." Simone tucked the key into her palm. "Go home. Get your sleep. I'll see you at 7. The parking lot was empty, every car gone, every light in the front of the building dark. Carver Hall sat quiet against the night sky, its old brick walls the color of dried blood under the single lamppost near the entrance. Simone pulled in slowly, headlights sweeping across the pavement, and parked near the side door. She checked her phone. 11:48. She would be in and out in 5 minutes. The keycard made a soft click against the reader. The side door opened with a low hiss of pressurized air, and the hallway swallowed her. The lights inside were on their nighttime setting, dim, amber, every third fixture lit. Her heels made small, precise sounds on the hardwood floor, and the whole building had that particular stillness of a space that had held a crowd and then been emptied. The gardenias were still out somewhere. She could smell them faintly, sweet and left behind. She walked the east corridor. The bridal suite was at the end, past the coat room and a small sitting alcove with 2 wing-back chairs. Simone had walked this hall 5 or 6 times today. She knew exactly how many steps it took. She had gotten maybe halfway down when she heard the voices. She stopped. Low. Coming from behind the bridal suite door, which was pulled almost shut, a thin line of yellow light running down the gap at the edge of the frame. She knew both voices inside 2 seconds. Julian's first, that warm, unhurried baritone. "Told you it was fine." Then her mother's, lighter, breathless in a way Simone had never heard from her. "Someone could have—" "No one's coming back tonight." Simone did not move. There was a roaring in her ears that she refused to give into. She stood in the dim amber light of that empty hallway, and she breathed once. Twice. The way she breathed on a job site when a wall came down wrong, and she needed to think before she spoke. She walked to the door. She did not throw it open. She pressed 2 fingers to the wood, slow and deliberate, just enough to widen the gap by 3 inches. 3 inches was enough. The room was lit warm, the same soft glow from the mirror vanity still on. Julian sat on the edge of the white tufted settee, jacket off, shirt open at the collar. Her mother stood between his knees, one hand curled at the back of his neck. They were not noticing the door. Simone stood there for exactly 1 moment, One long, silent moment where the whole picture printed itself into her memory, the way an image burns into paper. The amber light, the open jacket, her mother's burgundy dress, the easy, familiar way they occupied the same space, the way neither of them looked afraid of being found. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were steady. She didn't think about that consciously. She just noted it, the way she noted facts on a job site. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was level. The camera opened on the first tap. She held it at the gap in the door and pressed the shutter once. The phone was on silent. No click, no flash. Then she pulled the door back to where it had been. Careful, quiet. She turned and walked back down the hallway, past the wingback chairs, past the coat room, out the side door into the cold parking lot air. She sat in the driver's seat and looked at the photo. There it was, clear, undeniable. The timestamp in the corner reading 11:51 p.m., the night before her wedding. She set the phone face down on the passenger seat. Then she picked it back up and called Damon. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, you should be asleep. I need you to meet me." Her voice came out even, quiet, like she was discussing a blueprint. "Not tomorrow. Tonight." A beat of silence. "Simone?" "I need phone records," she said. "Hotel receipts, whatever you can pull. Julian and Patrice." She let the names sit there. The silence on his end lasted 3 full seconds. She could hear the shift in it, the way it changed from surprise into something colder and more focused. Damon had been in the military for 8 years. He knew how to pivot. "How far back do you want me to go?" he asked. "As far as you can reach." "Okay." His voice was low and controlled, but she heard the edge underneath it. He was angry. He was furious. But he kept it tamped down because she sounded like she needed him steady, and he knew it. "Okay. Where are you right now?" "Parking lot at Carver Hall." She started the engine. "I'm going home." "Don't go back inside." "I wasn't going to." "Simone." "I have the earrings," she said. She didn't, actually. She had forgotten them entirely. "I'll see you when you get there." She backed out of the parking spot, headlights moving across the empty building, and pulled onto the street. The venue shrank in her rearview mirror and disappeared. The morning was beautiful. That was the first thing Simone noticed when she woke up. Clear sky, pale gold light coming through the curtains, the kind of October morning that had no business being that pretty. She lay still for a moment and looked at the ceiling and let herself feel the weight of what she was carrying. Then she got up, showered, got dressed. Yolanda arrived at 8 with coffee and a garment bag and talked the entire time, filling the silence the way she always did, quick and warm and completely unaware. Simone let her talk. She nodded when it called for nodding. She laughed once, and it felt strange in her mouth, but Yolanda didn't notice. The dress fit exactly the way it had at the last fitting. White silk crepe, clean lines, nothing fussy. Simone had designed the silhouette herself, had sketched it on a napkin the night Julian proposed. She stood in front of the mirror while Yolanda worked the buttons up the back, and she looked at her own face and thought, composed. She looked composed. Good. Carver Hall had been transformed overnight. The ceremony space was warm with white flowers and candlelight. Every seat was filled, 83 guests, most of whom she had known for years. Cousins, colleagues, her grandmother Vivian in the 3rd row, silver earrings in her ears, watching the doors with patient, sharp eyes. Friends from college, Julian's business partners in pressed suits, people who had driven from 3 states away to be here. Patrice sat in the front row. She was wearing soft rose, a color she'd spent 3 weeks choosing. Her hair was done, her posture was perfect. She had a small, private smile on her face that Simone had seen before, the kind her mother wore when she felt like things had gone the way she wanted. She held her program in both hands, and she did not look toward the doors yet. She was glowing. Julian stood at the altar, charcoal suit, the white pocket square Simone had picked. His hands were loose at his sides, and his smile was that practiced, easy thing he aimed at a room like a flashlight, broad and warm and landing nowhere specific. The officiant stood beside him, speaking low. The music started. Simone appeared at the end of the aisle. The room turned. She walked slowly, the way she'd practiced, bouquet at her waist, eyes forward. She was aware of every face she passed, her cousin Marcus leaning over to whisper to his wife, Vivian's gaze tracking her like a compass needle, Julian's smile widening as she got closer. She was aware of Patrice, who reached up to touch the corner of her eye with one careful finger. Simone kept walking. She reached the altar. Julian took her hand. His fingers were warm, and she let him hold it, and she looked at him, directly, the way she always had. He searched her face for a moment, reflex maybe, the way someone looks for a storm, and found nothing but calm, so he smiled again and faced forward. The officiant began. Words about love, about commitment, about the people gathered in this room as witnesses to a promise. Simone heard all of it from a very quiet place inside herself, a room behind a room, where she had been standing since 11:51 the night before. Then came the moment. "If anyone here has cause to object to this union," the officiant said, his voice carrying easily through the silent hall, "speak now, or forever hold your peace." He hadn't even finished the sentence. "I do," Simone said. The word dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Julian turned to her, a small frown, half a laugh that didn't make it. "Simone, I was at the venue last night," she said. Her voice was level, clear, loud enough for the first 5 rows without her having to raise it. "Around midnight. I came back to get something I forgot." She reached into the small satin clutch that had been hanging from her wrist all morning. She took out her phone. "I found Julian in the bridal suite." She held the screen up, turned outward. The photo was large, bright, time-stamped. Someone in the 3rd row made a sound, a sharp inhale somewhere behind her, the kind of quiet that isn't quiet at all. It was 83 people holding their breath at the same moment. Julian's face changed. The smile disappeared. "Simone, listen to me. I'm not talking to you right now." She said it gently, almost politely, like correcting a mistake on a drawing. She turned to the front row. Patrice had gone very still. The program was pressed flat between both palms. Her face had drained of all that warm, private color, leaving something underneath that looked like a woman suddenly aware of every exit in a room. "Mom?" Simone let the words stand alone for a moment. "That's you in this photo. I think everyone can see that." The silence that followed was total. Simone set the phone back in her clutch. Then she reached down and took off her engagement ring. She held it between 2 fingers for 1 breath, 2, then placed it on the edge of the altar with a small, clean sound. "I won't be continuing the ceremony." She picked up her bouquet, turned, and walked. The aisle was long, and every face was turned toward her, and she looked at none of them. Ahead, at the back of the room, the tall wooden doors stood closed. And then, before she reached them, one side opened. Damon stepped into the gap. He said nothing. He didn't have to. He held the door, and she walked through it, and the door swung shut behind them. And the room, all 83 people, the flowers, the candles, the man still standing at the altar, stayed on the other side of it without her. Damon's office was on the 2nd floor of a narrow brick building on Clement Street, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a tax office. It smelled like old coffee and printer paper. There were filing cabinets against one wall and a corkboard covered in timelines and photographs on the other. A single window looked out onto the street below, where the afternoon was moving along like nothing had happened. Simone sat in the chair across from his desk. She had taken off the veil, the shoes, the long silk gloves she'd worn for the ceremony. But the dress was still on. She hadn't brought anything else to change into, and it wasn't the kind of thought that had made it onto her list today. She sat straight, hands in her lap, still in all that white crepe, looking like a bride who had wandered into the wrong building. Damon didn't say anything about it. He set a folder on the desk in front of her, dark blue, Not thick, but thick enough. "I started pulling last night," he said, taking the chair beside her rather than behind the desk. "Called in 2 contacts before 9 this morning. Hotel records come easy when you know who to ask." Simone opened the folder. The first page was a printed spreadsheet, dates down the left side, hotel names in the center column, room charges on the right. She read each line slowly, the way she read structural documents, not searching for what she wanted to find, but for what was actually there. There were 9 entries. The earliest one was dated February 14th, 8 months ago, almost to the week. February. That was the month Julian had surprised her with a weekend trip to Carmel. They'd walked on the beach, and he'd told her he wanted to start looking at houses. She had come home sunburned and happy, and had called her mother the next morning to tell her about it. She looked at the February 14th entry again. The hotel was 40 minutes from Carmel. Not the same town, but close enough. "He used a personal card for most of them," Damon said quietly. "A couple were under a business account." She turned to the next page. Message logs. Not the content, Damon's contacts couldn't pull that, but the records themselves. Frequency. Duration. The number Julian had been contacting was listed, and below it, Damon had written her mother's name in plain print. The calls ran from February straight through to yesterday. Yesterday. Simone set the page down. She looked at the corkboard across the room without really seeing it. 8 months. Not a moment of weakness at a rehearsal dinner. Not one terrible night when something broke loose. 8 months of hotel rooms and phone calls, and her mother refilling Julian's glass and touching his arm to straighten his tie, and Simone standing right there in the same room, warm and unsuspecting, believing in something that had already been hollowed out. She thought about her mother crying at the engagement party. "Happy tears," she'd said. "I'm just so happy for you, baby." She breathed in through her nose, out through her mouth. "There's one more thing," Damon said. He reached over and turned to the last page. A single printed screenshot. A text thread. No content, just an exchange of short messages between Julian's number and a third number Damon had highlighted. Below it, he had written, "Julian's business partner, Marcus Webb. Ongoing contact throughout affair period." "I don't know what that means yet," Damon said, "but Julian's been talking to Webb a lot, more than a business partner usually would. I can dig further." Simone stared at the highlighted number. Julian's business. She hadn't thought much about it since last night. He'd always presented it well. New development projects, talked about growth and investors, used words that sounded solid. But she was an architect. She knew what solid looked like and what it didn't. She had never looked too closely, and she knew now, sitting in this office in her wedding dress, that she should have. "Okay," she said. Damon waited. "This isn't about what I feel right now," she said. "I can feel whatever I feel later." She closed the folder carefully and set it flat on the desk. "Right now, I need to understand all of it. Every piece. Not just that it happened, but why. The whole shape of it." "Then that's what we build," Damon said. He didn't rush it, didn't try to add anything to it. "Whatever I need from you," Simone said, "I'll ask, and I'll be the one who decides what happens with it." "I know," he said. Just that. She nodded once. She looked down at the folder, then past it, her gaze moving to the window, to the ordinary street below, to the dry cleaner's orange sign swinging slightly in the wind. Julian had been struggling. She could feel it now, the outline of something she hadn't looked at directly. A man that charming, that careful about appearances. He needed something from the marriage. Not just her, not just her mother. Something else. "I need to talk to Grandma Vivian," she said. Vivian Aldridge lived in the same house she had lived in for 41 years. a pale yellow craftsman on a quiet street in the Sunset District, with a porch that sagged slightly on the left side and a garden that had never once looked anything other than perfect. She grew dahlias. She kept them in rows, staked and labeled, and she checked on them every morning before she made her coffee. Simone had always thought that said something about her grandmother, the kind of woman who tended to things. She parked in front at 6:30. She had changed out of the dress by then, stopped at her apartment first, folded it carefully and left it on the bed, put on dark slacks and a plain gray sweater. She hadn't cried yet. She didn't know where that was, what it was waiting for, but it hadn't come. She knocked twice, and Vivian opened the door before the second knock finished. She looked at Simone for a moment, one long, quiet look, the way she always looked at things she was sizing up. "Come in," she said, and stepped back. The living room smelled like sandalwood and the specific kind of warmth that only old houses have. Family photographs covered one wall, decades of them, framed in mismatched gold and dark wood. Simone and Damon at maybe 7 and 8. Patrice, young and laughing, holding a baby on the front porch steps. Vivian's late husband, Chester, in a navy suit at some long-ago event. Vivian brought 2 cups of tea without asking, set them on the coffee table, and sat down across from Simone with the composed stillness of a woman who had outlasted a great deal. "I heard something happened at the wedding," she said. "I want to hear it from you." So Simone told her, clean and factual, the same way she had told Damon, what she'd seen at the venue, the folder, the dates, the 8 months. Vivian didn't interrupt. She held her teacup in both hands and listened, and her face stayed still the whole time. Not cold, but controlled. The same composure Simone had grown up watching and had quietly tried to learn. When Simone finished, Vivian set her cup down carefully. "I owe you something," she said, "and I should have told you sooner. I didn't because I thought it was a kindness." Her voice was steady. "I've been investing in Julian's company. A little over a year now." Simone went still. "He came to me last spring," Vivian continued, "said he had a development project in Oakland, mixed use, residential and retail. He had the pitch ready, projections, parcels, the whole presentation. He was convincing." She paused. "He told me it would build something for your future together. I believed that. I wrote the first check in April." "How much?" Simone asked. Vivian told her. The number was not small. Simone set her own cup down. Her mind was already moving through it. Not emotionally, not yet, but structurally, the way she moved through a blueprint that wasn't adding up. Julian's business, the way he talked about it, always forward-looking, always about the next project, the next deal, never about what had already closed or what had already returned. She thought about the hotel records, the personal card, the business account. "Did you ever see financial reports?" she asked. "Quarterly updates? Returns?" Vivian's eyes shifted slightly, just slightly. "He sent documents. I'm not a developer. I trusted the numbers he gave me." "His partner's name is Marcus Webb," Simone said. "Do you know him?" "Julian mentioned him once. I never met him." Simone leaned forward. "Grandma, I think the business is in trouble. I think it's been in trouble for a while. The way he presents it, the way he talks around specifics. I work in construction. I know what it sounds like when someone is building on debt they can't support." She held her grandmother's gaze. "I think he needed the marriage. Not just me. The family's money. Your money. Connections. A reason for you to keep investing." Vivian was quiet for a long moment. "He used my investment to fund a life that would keep me giving him more," she said. Not a question, just the shape of it, spoken out loud for the first time. "That's what it looks like," Simone said. Vivian straightened. She was 78 years old, and she sat like she was carved from something that didn't bend. Her jaw tightened once, then settled. "I have every document he sent me," she said. "Every transfer record. If there's something there, we'll find it. Damon can help go through it." "Good," Vivian nodded once. Then let him. The room was quiet for a moment. Outside, a car passed slowly. One of the dahlias in the window box moved in the draft from the heating vent. "I want to help you make this right," Vivian said. Her voice was clear and certain. "Whatever it costs, whatever it takes." She looked at Simone directly. "But before we go any further, I want to speak to Patrice. Not for her sake, for mine." A pause. "Can you arrange that?" Patrice called at 7:30 in the morning. Simone was already awake. She had been awake since 5, sitting at her kitchen table with a legal pad, writing down dates. She let the phone ring twice before she answered. "Please," Patrice's voice was thin, wrecked. "Please just come. I can't do this over the phone." Simone looked at the legal pad. Then she said, "I'll be there at 10. Patrice's apartment was in the Richmond district, on the 3rd floor of a building with a yellow awning and a broken buzzer that had been broken for 2 years. Simone knew to call when she arrived. She stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the window. The curtain moved. The front door buzzed open without her having to call. Patrice was waiting in the doorway of the apartment when Simone reached the landing. She was wearing a cream robe, not yet dressed, her hair loose around her shoulders. Her eyes were swollen. She had been crying for a long time, the kind of crying that leaves a person looking hollowed out, like something had been wrung from them and nothing had come back to fill the space. She looked, Simone thought, very old. And then she felt something cold move through her for thinking it. "Come in," Patrice said softly. Simone came in. The apartment was tidy, the way it always was. Patrice kept things in order. Fresh flowers on the table, a folded throw blanket on the couch arm, everything arranged just so. She had redecorated 3 times since the divorce. New rugs, new curtains, a different couch, like she kept trying to make the space feel like it belonged to someone new. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Patrice had made coffee. Her hands shook slightly when she set the cup down. "I don't know how to start," she said. "Then I'll wait," Simone said. "But you asked me here, so start." Patrice looked down at the table, her fingers pressed flat against the surface like she was bracing herself against something. "When your father left," she began, "I told myself I was fine. I told everyone I was fine." She exhaled slowly. "But I wasn't. I looked in the mirror and I saw what he had decided wasn't enough anymore. And that doesn't go away, Simone. That doesn't just heal. 8 years later, and it is still right there, every single morning." Simone said nothing. "Julian made me feel like I wasn't invisible." Patrice's voice broke on the last word. "I know how that sounds. I know exactly how that sounds. But he looked at me like I was still worth looking at. Like I was still—" She pressed her hand over her mouth for a moment. "I knew it was wrong. I knew from the beginning, but I kept telling myself it wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything. It was just—" "It was 8 months, Mom." The words landed flat and hard. Patrice flinched. 8 months, Simone said again, steady, clear. "That's not a moment of weakness. That's a decision you made and kept making, over and over, while I was planning a wedding, while I was happy." She paused. "While I was trusting you." Patrice's eyes filled. "I know." "He was using you," Simone said. "I don't know if you've let yourself see that yet. He was using both of us, but that doesn't change what you did." She kept her voice even. It wasn't easy. It was the hardest kind of even, the kind held in place by something strong and tightly wound. "You were my mother. You were supposed to be in my corner, and you chose him." "I'm so sorry." The words came out cracked and wet. "Simone, I am so sorry. You have to know that I believe you're sorry," Simone said. "I do. But sorry doesn't change the shape of what happened." Silence fell between them. Outside, a bus groaned past on the street below. Then Patrice wiped her eyes and straightened slightly. Something shifted in her face, something subtle and careful. I think about the family," she said. "Your grandmother, Damon, everyone who was there yesterday." Her voice had changed. It was steadier now, more deliberate. "If this all gets dragged out, if it becomes some big public thing, it doesn't just affect me, Simone. It affects all of us. The family's name, everything we've built." Simone looked at her. "I'm asking you," Patrice said, "to let us handle this quietly, privately, for the family's sake." Simone was quiet for 3 full seconds. "No," she said. Patrice blinked. "Simone?" "No." She said it the same way both times. No rise in her voice, no heat. "The truth is already out. Everyone in that room saw it. What you're asking me to do is protect you from the rest of it. And I'm not going to do that." She picked up her bag from the chair beside her and stood. "Consequences are coming. Whatever shape they take, they're coming. Your comfort isn't something I'm factoring in anymore." Patrice opened her mouth. Simone was already walking to the door. She sat in her car for a moment. The street was quiet, ordinary. She pulled out her phone and called Yolanda. "Hey," Yolanda answered on the first ring. "How'd it go?" "About how I expected," Simone said. "I need you to start working on the gift returns, and I need you to get ahead of anything that's circulating. Quietly. I'm shifting focus." "To what?" "The meeting," Simone said. "I'm calling everyone together. It's time." The days that followed were quiet. Not peaceful, quiet. There is a difference. Peace settles. This kind of quiet was something else. It was the silence of work, of preparation, of a woman who had decided exactly what she was going to do and was now simply doing it. Simone came to Vivian's house on Tuesday morning. Damon was already there when she arrived, sitting at Vivian's dining room table with his laptop open and a stack of folders lined up at his elbow. The table was old mahogany, dark and solid, the kind that had held 100 family meals. Now it held something else. Evidence. Vivian set a pot of tea in the center and sat down without a word, folding her hands in her lap. She was dressed, as she always was, like the day required something from her. Pressed slacks, pearl earrings, her silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her neck. She was 78 years old, and she had the stillness of someone who had survived enough to know that falling apart was a choice, not a requirement. Simone sat across from Damon and opened her own notebook. "Walk me through it," she said. Damon turned the first folder toward her. "Hotel receipts, 8 months of them. I cross-referenced the dates against your shared calendar." He tapped the page. 11 of those nights, Julian told you he was traveling for work." Simone looked at the dates. She recognized them. A conference in Sacramento, a site visit in Portland, a dinner with investors. She had kissed him goodbye on some of those mornings. She had asked him to text her when he landed. She looked at the receipts for a moment longer than she needed to. Then she turned the page. "What about the finances?" she asked. Vivian spoke before Damon could. "I've been in contact with my attorney." Her voice was measured, precise. "The investment I made into Julian's company, $140,000 across 14 months, was structured as a private loan with a convertible agreement, meaning if the marriage had gone through, certain repayment terms would have been altered." She paused. "Those terms do not apply now. The full amount is due." "And the company?" Simone asked. Damon pulled a second folder. "Leveraged heavily. 2 of his development projects are behind on construction loans. His main business partner has already started pulling back. I found a filing from 3 weeks ago that suggests a quiet restructuring." He looked at Simone. Without Vivian's capital, and without the connections that came with marrying into this family, Julian's company doesn't make it to next year. The room was quiet. Vivian picked up her tea. "He didn't just want your hand, baby," she said, looking at Simone over the rim of the cup. "He needed it." Simone already knew that. She had known it since she'd sat in Vivian's living room 3 days ago. But hearing it laid out across the table, in dates and dollar amounts and legal filings, made it land differently. It made it real in a way that feeling alone never quite managed. "All right," she said. "Here's how this goes." She walked them through it. A family meeting, not a confrontation on someone's doorstep, not a phone call, not a letter. A room, a table, everyone present, Julian and Patrice both there, believing they were coming to sort out the financial loose ends from a cancelled wedding. Venue costs, gift returns, deposits, the kind of dry, practical business that gave people a reason to show up without their guard fully raised. "Vivian, I need you there," Simone said. "Not to speak first, but when we get to the finances, your presence is the leverage. Julian needs to see you in that room and understand what it means." Vivian set down her cup. "I'll be there." "Damon," she looked at her brother, "I need you there too, but I need you to let me run it." Damon held her gaze for a moment. She could see the effort it took him, the jaw set, the slight tightening around his eyes. He didn't like sitting still when something needed to be handled. She knew that about him. She had always known that about him. "I'll be there," he said. "It's your room." She nodded once. Yolanda was running her own operation in the background, and she was doing it without complaint. Gift returns had been coordinated and nearly completed. She had personally reached out to every guest on the registry. She had spoken quietly with 3 family members who had started asking the wrong questions in group chats, redirecting them with enough warmth and enough firmness that the questions had stopped. She had not posted a single word online, and she had made sure no one close to Simone had either. She called Simone on Wednesday evening to check in. "Gifts are handled," she said. "Venue deposit dispute is settled. They're giving back 60%. And your cousin Renee has been informed that now is not the time for opinions." "Thank you," Simone said. "Don't thank me. Just handle your business." A pause. "You good?" "I will be," Simone said. "After Friday." She drafted the message herself, short, neutral, no room for misreading the tone, and no information that would give either of them time to build a defense. "There are unfinished matters that need to be resolved in person. I'm asking that you both be present Friday evening at 6 p.m. Location to follow. This is not optional." She sent it to Julian first, then to Patrice. Then she set her phone face down on the counter and went back to her legal pad. Friday came like any other evening. The sky outside Vivian's house turned a deep, bruised orange as the sun dropped behind the tree line. The porch light came on automatically. The magnolia in the front yard stood perfectly still. Inside, the dining room table had been cleared and reset. No evidence folders, no legal pads. Just a pitcher of water, a few glasses, and 6 chairs arranged with intention. Simone had arrived an hour early. She was wearing black slacks and a cream blouse. Simple, deliberate. She had taken care with herself that morning, not to perform beauty, but because she refused to look like someone who had been broken. She sat at the far end of the table and went over her notes one more time, then closed the folder and did not open it again. Damon stood near the window with a glass of water, not speaking. He was wearing a dark jacket. His posture was relaxed in the way that only military training could produce. Calm on the surface, fully alert underneath. Vivian sat at the head of the table, pearls in place, hands folded. Patrice arrived at 5 to 6. She came through the door in a cream-colored blouse and pressed trousers, as though she had also taken care with her appearance. Her eyes swept the room fast. Vivian, Damon, Simone, and something shifted behind them. She had clearly expected something smaller, something more forgiving. "Simone," she said. "Sit down, Mama," Simone said. Quiet. Even. Patrice sat. Julian arrived 2 minutes later, keys still in his hand, looking like a man who had decided on the drive over that he was going to control the room. He was wearing a blazer, jaw clean-shaven, smile already loading on his face before he had fully stepped inside. The smile slipped when he saw Vivian. Just barely. But Simone saw it. "Evening, everyone," he said, pulling out a chair. "Let's get this squared away." No one responded. Simone let the silence sit for exactly 3 seconds. Then she opened the folder. "I'm going to walk through some things," she said. "You're both going to listen. When I'm done, we'll discuss what happens next." Julian let out a small breath, almost a laugh. "Simone, I said you're going to listen." He closed his mouth. She laid the first page on the table and turned it so both Julian and Patrice could see it. Hotel receipts. 11 of them, dated and itemized. Beside each one, a date she had printed from the shared calendar. Julian's stated reason for being away. 8 months, she said. Not a night, not a weekend. 8 months. 11 separate hotel stays, beginning 4 months after you proposed to me. The room was silent. Patrice looked down at the page. Her jaw moved, but no sound came out. Simone turned to the second document. "Julian, your company has 2 active construction loans in default review. You have a restructuring filing from 3 weeks ago. And for the past 14 months, you have been receiving capital from my grandmother's private investment account." She paused. $140,000. Julian's expression changed. The charm moved aside and something harder replaced it. "That investment was mutual." "It was a private loan," Vivian said from the head of the table. Her voice was the temperature of glass. "With repayment terms that were conditional on a marriage that did not occur. The full amount is now due." She looked at him without blinking. "I've already begun withdrawal proceedings with my attorney. If you'd like to contest that, you're welcome to." Julian stared at her. "You needed this family," Simone said. "Not just me. The money, the connections, the stability. This marriage was a financial strategy as much as anything else, and you ran it for 14 months while sleeping with my mother." She said it plainly, not with rage, like she was reading a report. She turned to Patrice. "I need you to say it, out loud, right now, in this room, in front of your mother and your son." Patrice looked up. Her eyes were wet. "Simone, please." "I need you to say it." It wasn't what it looked like. It was a—" "Mama." Simone's voice did not rise. "Say it." The silence that followed was the longest in the room so far. Patrice's chin trembled. Her hands pressed flat on the table. Damon watched her from the window and said nothing. "I had an affair with Julian," Patrice said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "During your engagement." No one moved. Julian pushed back from the table and stood up. "This is—" He shook his head, jaw tight. "You want to play it this way? Fine." He pointed toward the folder. "You pull that funding, I will have my attorney look at every document your grandmother signed, every single one. We'll see how clean that process was." Vivian looked up at him. "Sit down, Julian," she said. He didn't sit down. He picked up his keys from the table, looked once around the room, at Simone last, and walked out. The front door opened and closed. The room stayed quiet. Patrice sat with her hands still flat on the table. She did not cry anymore. She just sat there, very still, while Vivian looked at her with an expression that held no warmth at all. The family looked at Patrice, and Patrice had no more words left. The weeks after the meeting moved quietly. There was no explosion, no dramatic phone calls, no public posts or long letters sent to people she barely knew. Simone had decided long before that night at Vivian's table that the truth didn't need theater. It only needed delivery. So she delivered it, one conversation at a time. The first call she made was to Marcus Webb. Marcus was a commercial developer who had partnered with Julian on 2 projects in the past 3 years. He was also the man Julian had been courting hardest for a third deal, a mixed-use development on the east side of the city that would have taken Julian's company from struggling to solvent almost overnight. Marcus was careful with his money, and even more careful with his reputation. Simone knew him professionally. She had worked the same circles for years. She met him for coffee on a Tuesday morning at a quiet place on Broad Street. She sat down, ordered nothing, and told him everything. Not with venom, just facts. She told him about the investment, the debt, the defaulted loans, the misused capital. She told him what Vivian's attorney had already filed. She told him about the affair, not as gossip, but because it was part of the same pattern. A man who had been performing stability for 2 years while everything underneath was caving in. Marcus listened without interrupting. When she finished, he set down his cup. "I had a meeting scheduled with him next Thursday," he said. "I know," Simone said. "I appreciate you telling me directly." "I didn't want you to find out some other way," she said. "You deserve the actual picture." That meeting never happened. Marcus quietly withdrew. And because Marcus Webb talked to people who talked to other people, the story spread the way real stories spread. Not from a headline, but from a conversation. Then another, until everyone who needed to know simply knew. Vivian's attorney filed the formal withdrawal paperwork on a Wednesday. Julian tried to negotiate through a representative first. Then, through a brief, tense voicemail, he left for Vivian directly. His tone measured, still carrying faint traces of the charm he had been running on for years. Vivian did not return the call. Her attorney did, and the message was simple. The terms of the loan agreement were clear. The marriage had not occurred. The full amount was due, and any attempt to litigate the disbursement process would result in a counterclaim that Julian's company, in its current financial state, would not survive. Within 3 weeks, the business partnership Julian had spent the better part of a year building dissolved. Without the Webb deal, without Vivian's backing, without the professional credibility that had rested, more than Julian ever let on the perception that he was part of a solid, connected family. He was rebuilding from nothing now. Simone didn't celebrate that. She simply noted it, the way she noted when the load-bearing wall she'd planned for finally held the weight it was supposed to hold. With Patrice, the distance came without announcement. Vivian stopped calling. She stopped inviting. When Patrice reached out, through texts at first, then through a long, carefully written letter that arrived at Vivian's house on a Thursday, Vivian read it once and set it aside. She did not respond. Damon was civil when Patrice tried to reach him. He picked up the phone once. He listened for 4 minutes. Then he said, "I love you, Mama, but I'm not doing this," and ended the call. The extended family pulled back the same way water pulls from a shoreline before a wave. Not loudly, but completely. Aunts who had always called on birthdays didn't call. Invitations to Sunday dinners stopped coming. The family wasn't cruel about it. There were no confrontations, no group letters, no coordinated rejection. The family had just heard the truth, all of it, and they had made their own choices. Patrice had asked Simone to protect the family's reputation. What she hadn't understood was that Simone had protected the family, just not from the truth. Simone did not call her mother. She did not send a letter. She left the door closed the same way it needed to stay, not in anger, but in clarity. Understanding why Patrice had done what she did had not made it smaller. It had only made it sadder. And Simone had no more room for sad things that asked her to carry them. The call from Harlan and Brooke came on a Friday afternoon. They were a development group based in Atlanta, a firm she had admired for years and quietly sent her portfolio to 8 months back, before the wedding, before any of this. They had a project. A commercial building, 12 stories, sitting on a lot in a part of Atlanta that was being redesigned from the ground up. They wanted a lead architect. They wanted her. Simone stood at her kitchen window and looked out at the street below. The same street she had looked at every day for 6 years. The same row of parked cars, the same corner store with the green awning. She thought about it for exactly 1 day. Then she called them back and said yes. The lobby smelled like fresh concrete and cedar. It was the smell of something new, something finished. Simone had learned, over the years, to tell the difference between a building that was merely done and one that was actually complete. This one was complete. She could feel it the way she always could, in the stillness of the air, in the way the light hit the floor from the east-facing windows, clean and even, and exactly where she had drawn it on paper 2 years ago. 12 stories, glass and warm stone, a building that sat on a corner in Atlanta's west side like it had always belonged there. It had been her first project as principal architect at Aldridge Studio. It would not be her last. She stood near the center of the lobby, hands in the pockets of her coat, and just looked. A few workers were still finishing the detail work near the reception desk, a custom panel of slatted wood that had taken 3 tries to get right. She had been firm about that. Not difficult, just firm. There was a difference, and she had learned how to hold it. Her assistant, Kezia, crossed the lobby toward her with a tablet in hand. "The Harlan and Brooke rep confirmed for 2 o'clock, Kezia said, "and your 3:30 called to move to 4. "That's fine," Simone said. "Give me 20 minutes in here first." Kezia nodded and turned back toward the temporary site office without another word. She had been with Simone for 14 months. She already knew that 20 minutes in the finished lobby of a new building was not optional. It was something Simone gave herself every time, a quiet acknowledgement, a moment to stand inside what she had built before the world moved in and made it ordinary. Aldridge Studio had opened 18 months ago. Vivian had been the first investor. She had offered with no conditions and no ceremony, just a phone call one evening, Vivian's voice dry and certain, saying she had looked over Simone's numbers and they were good, and she wanted to be part of it. Simone had accepted. Not out of need exactly, but out of trust. Vivian had always been one of the few people who saw her clearly and never asked her to be smaller because of it. The firm had grown faster than even Simone had projected. 4 architects now, plus Kezia and a project manager named Todd, who had followed Simone from her previous firm and never once acted like he was doing her a favor. They had completed 3 projects and had 2 more under contract. The kind of growth that didn't happen by accident. It happened because she built it. Every piece. There was a man named Elliot in her life now. She didn't think of him in dramatic terms. That was part of what made him real. He was a structural engineer she had met on the Harlan and Brooke project, quiet and careful with his words, someone who had never once tried to rush her or fill silences she wasn't ready to fill. They had been together for just over a year. He knew about Julian. He knew about Patrice. He had asked about it once, listened without commentary, and never brought it up again unless she did. She appreciated that more than she could easily say. It wasn't a story. It was just a life. Hers. Damon had driven down from the city for the building's opening the week before. He had stood in this same lobby and looked up at the ceiling and then over at her, and the expression on his face was not surprise. It was something more settled than surprise, something that looked like it had been sitting in him for a long time, just waiting for the right moment to show itself. "You built this," he had said. "We built this," she had said, meaning the team. He had shaken his head, just slightly. "No, you built this." She hadn't argued. She had just let him be right. Patrice still lived in the same apartment on the north side. Simone knew this not because she stayed in contact, but because Damon mentioned it sometimes, careful and brief. Patrice had tried to reconnect twice in the past year, once through a card that arrived at Aldridge Studio's address, which meant she had looked it up. Once through a mutual family friend who called Simone and stumbled through an awkward message that Simone received, thanked the woman for, and did not act on. She held no anger toward her mother anymore. She had set it down somewhere in Atlanta and simply not picked it back up. What remained was not warmth, and it was not coldness. It was a kind of clear-eyed stillness, the knowledge that understanding someone's pain didn't obligate you to keep absorbing it. Julian, as far as she knew, was still rebuilding. A smaller firm now, a different city. She had heard his name once in a professional conversation and felt nothing except mild curiosity, the kind you feel about a place you once lived and no longer visit. She took the elevator to the top floor. Her office had a wall of windows on the east side. She stood at the glass and looked out at the skyline. Atlanta in the morning light. Other buildings, other structures, some familiar and some still rising. The city was always becoming something, always mid-construction, always in the middle of its own patient reinvention. She understood that now in a way she hadn't 2 years ago. She stood there quietly, hands still in her pockets, the city spread out in front of her, and felt nothing but settled. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.